I am Matthew Glidden. I am Vice Chair for Events for the SABR Baseball Card uh, Committee, and I am happy to welcome you to a session tonight where we're going to talk about what it means when you reach the stage of your collection where you've decided perhaps you need to divest of your collection, plan ahead, whatever it happens to be, where you think about not only have I bought all these wonderful things that I have and I enjoy so much, perhaps there's a future where I don't need quite as many of them. Perhaps I'm planning ahead for the family or anybody else who might have these responsibilities around these cards. Cards are phenomenal things. I have several of them at my desk at any given time. Here's a wonderful example produced in the late 70s, where the point of the card was to capture all of these living players who still were accessible in order to get autographs at that time. So many of the ones you see now, in this case, you're looking at Bud Hassett. This one arrived at my doorstep today from eBay. Someone decided they didn't need this particular card anymore. They're willing to sell it for a certain amount of money. I was happy to add it to my collection. Today, we're going to talk through and hear from the experience of Jeff Katz, who himself also was able to go through this whole journey in considering what his collection would mean, what it was he wanted to do, who he decided to work with, and then what he thinks about things now. We're going to have a lot of people here today. The end goal really is for you to take away as much as you care to from this session. So please continue to listen as much as you want to. The recording will be available within a short time on the SABR Baseball Videos YouTube channel. Jason, anything you'd like to add before we get underway?
I'm just going to make two quick announcements. So maybe some of you were at our recent joint efforts with the Elysian Fields chapter out of New Jersey or the Chicago chapter. We had a lot of fun putting together baseball card programming for those two chapters. Well, if you are in a chapter that has some collectors and might enjoy working with us on baseball card programming, Matthew's your guy or I'm your guy, get in touch with us. Point is, if you went to those and had fun and kind of want your own chapter to do something with that, we're looking for chapters to step up. Number two, I'll just say, we have no Jefferson Burdick Award winners in today's audience, as far as I can tell, although we do have Andrew Aaronstein, whose father was the inaugural winner. So that reminds me, we are about to be soliciting nominations for the 2026 Jefferson Burdick Award. That is the highest honor bestowed on anybody by SABR baseball cards. So you'll see that on the blog. You'll see that on social media. You'll get that in the SABR baseball card email notices. So it's not yet, but pretty soon we're going to be looking. So if you've got somebody in mind, don't forget, write them down on a napkin. We're going to be asking you in a week or two. So, okay, with that, I'm going to hand it back to Matthew.
Great. Thank you, Jason. And remember that at any time you can drop questions into the chat. We will handle chat questions and we will handle regular Q&A after Jeff has done the bulk of his discussion. If he decides he wants to break and handle particular questions in between, it's free for him to do so. But I'm going to assume that he'll want to talk through his whole experience and you'll be able to decide what exactly you want to know once we've wrapped up. That means it's over to you, Jeff. Please, we will
Great.
give you the helm, and if you have anything you need from us, let us know.
Will do. Thank you. Thanks, Matthew. Thanks, everyone, for being here. I see a lot of friends in the audience. So for those friends, they know I can talk. So if you need for me to stop at a certain point, you'll probably have to flag me. But I do have kind of a semblance of a narrative that I want to cover. Keeping in mind always that this is just one man's journey and one man's story, but relevant to the topic at hand. So I started collecting seriously in 1972. I had always been a card collector, all cards, all sports, non-sports, but didn't keep them. I wasn't a victim of my mother throwing them out. I just didn't care. But in 72, I started buying old cards through the mail. And it was clear that it made no sense to buy old cards and get rid of new cards. So I did kind of stop that destructive path pretty early. At some point in my collecting life, I did read someone say that a good collector, whatever that means, will sell the bottom of their collection to add to the top. And I instinctively knew that made sense, but I couldn't get there because, every card was my precious baby. and all 12 1973 Tom Halls mattered. And I couldn't possibly sell these things. But that changed kind of as I got older, as my kids got older. And I don't know if some of you have seen the Judd Apatow movie, This Is 40. Love that movie. Paul Rudd plays a guy who has a record label and he's struggling. And Albert Brooks is his father. And Albert Brooks always needs money. At some point, Paul Rudd doesn't have the money, so he goes to Albert Brooks's house and gives him a John Lennon signed lithograph. And Albert Brooks says, "What is this?" He says, "Oh, it's John Lennon from the Beatles. You can sell this." And Albert Brooks says, "I need money and you gave me a project." And that really resonated to me because I had been thinking about my cards and my adult children and thinking that, okay, this box of vintage hockey cards, you can take it to the local card store, but the first 10 cards are worth $3,000, so you can sell those. In this box, there's a set in the middle. I'm like, this is an insane thing to tell them to have to do, so why don't I work on that? So I did start with kind of just selling stuff. I had lithographs. I had things that really just I'd get and they'd sit in the corner. Those were easy to sell. Selling doubles, when Twitter was not a hellhole, a lot of us met through Twitter and there were card sales and I could move stuff that way. But I did start selling on eBay. I kind of broke free of thinking I had to keep everything and tried to think about what was easy to move mentally. I did kind of in my early eBay selling learn that I hated the auction process. Mark Armour and I talked about this recently. There was one point I had three Walter Payton rookie cards. One I needed for my set. The second one I put up for an auction. It was sharp as hell, and it sold for $80. This was about 12, 13 years ago. That really hurt because it was a much more, even at that point, it was probably a $300 card. Now it's probably $1,000. I mean, I don't know. So what I learned from that was I want to do buy it nows. But buy it nows based on real research. So some of my cards that are very sharp, I will look at equivalent graded cards and what they sold for. Always look at the sold listings. People can list for whatever they want. The sold listings are the market. And I will price them like if I think it's a near mint card based on a PSA 7, I will price it that way, but accept offers, knowing that it is unlikely that I will sell it as at a graded price. I will tell you that sometimes I have. I had a sharp, help me out, I think it's 64 or 65 Tops Hockey were the tall boys. I had a sharp Gordie Howe. I listed it for $750 and it's sold. I mean, there are aberrations in the market, but really researching the sold listings will give you a guide. If you want to take a crack at it, go ahead. I feel that by looking at it the way I do, I've not hurt myself on the upside. I've never listed something for $200 that should have sold for $500.
Jeff, can you
So,
spend a little more time telling us physically what is it you're doing on eBay? What is it you're doing with any other resources that let you decide this is a good thing to list versus not?
so
And what were your expectations going in?
yeah, so how I list kind of depends on what I'm looking at in my collection at the time. And I'll tell you a recent story that is actually an aberration story. In 2004, I bought a 1941 Gaudi Mel Ott red, graded PSA 7 off center. I spent $200 on it. I happened to have a record of it, but it's off center, so it's really like a 5. The reality is, I mean, that set has a lot of cutting problems. The whole line that says New York Giants outfield is missing. So once I realized that, I'm like, I don't even want it really. I listed it for a while a few years ago at about $650, which is what PSA 7s at the time seemed to go for. Never got any action. But I thought about it recently. I'm like, let me see what real PSA sevens went to without qualifiers. One went for about 900 bucks, 950 a few years ago. PSA four and fives were going for 300 or 400 bucks. Let me relist it. I'll just list it at $1,000, see what happens. But I looked at PSA sold auctions. I looked at eBay sold auctions. There were nothing like it. Listed it for 1,000. Someone must have had a Gaudi red on their search list because I got a $950 offer within seconds, which I quickly sold. It was so out of the market that I was like, maybe I have missed something. Maybe something happened in the in the hobby that I was unaware of. But I don't have that many graded cards, so I don't look that way. But there's nothing I have that is so rare that it hasn't been sold. So there are always markets.
How did you, honestly, how did you feel after the transaction? Did you think, I wish I could have slept on it tonight, and the next morning I wish it would have sold as opposed to within seconds? Like what was your
I
mindset at the time?
I actually called a friend of mine who lives in Cooperstown who deals in a lot of auctions and stuff, and I said, "Listen, this is crazy. I know I have to sell this. It's hundreds of dollars above the market. But do you think I'm missing something?" He's like, "No." So I thought it was a fluke on the buyer side that at some point, like he was going to renege or something. I have not, and this is a good time to kind of enter into a topic I think is important. As you're selling stuff, try to really think about whether you want to sell it. I've known enough friends who have regretted sales. Now, granted, some of these guys have stuff um, that is hard to find, like Honus Wagner letters or something. I don't have anything like that. So if I decide I shouldn't have sold that Mel Ott card, I could probably buy an equivalent one for less. I can get it back. But so far, I've sold tons and tons of things and haven't regretted any. So I'm fortunate, but I would really kind of tell everyone on this call to think about that. You know, even when things go up and prices go up, and you're like, oh shoot, um, I should sell this. If you're gonna wish you had it still, like I just sold a bunch of really crappy condition doubles from 68 to 71, but I did pull out a 1971 Rich Morales, which I did write about for the SABR blog. That card is so destroyed that it always had a special place in my heart. I'm like, I'm pulling that card. I don't want to sell that card. No one needed it. Someone just put up about, I will answer because I saw it, about raw versus graded. I don't have a lot of graded cards. I don't seek to grade those cards. If someone grabs something from me for $200 and can get it graded and it's worth 400, they have actually added value in a way that I'm not willing to. So I'm fine with that. I will tell a story that this was a hard thing. I knew a guy who was in the printing world, and he gave me it was a Jordan, when Jordan came out of retirement, Skybox put out these regular Jordan emotion cards and some special ones. And I had a sheet of only Jordans.
And
I
this is
had
the
seen
first, he had retired the first time and
the
he was
first
coming
time.
back out of the, yeah.
Yeah. So I saw like some gem mints that sold for a lot, but I'm like, all right, there's real value in this, but what am I going to do about it? I can find a printer to cut it. They may not cut it to gem mint tens. I could list it. I ended up selling it for $500. I think the guy who bought it, I think, ended up cutting it and selling stuff. So he's going to rake in thousands. But he did something I was not willing to do. So I don't feel bad about that. I don't feel like I need to extract every dollar. Once I've sold them, it's out of my mind. I don't look back. I will say there's one card when I was really selling early and getting excited. I pulled an Aaron Judge Gypsy Queen autograph and I sold it. They were going for like 20, $25 at the time. I put it up for 35. He went on a tear. Every card got bought. So that was the worst sale, but I'm not a particularly big Judge fan, so it doesn't hurt my feelings. But I do think, that's something to think about. If you feel you have something that's gradable and everyone thinks their cards are much nicer than the grading companies put out, then you go for that. And I have found we have a great local store in Cooperstown, Yastrzemski Sports. Adam has sent in some stuff for me when he sends things in, so the price is a little better that way. But there's not much I feel I need to authenticate. So I did want to answer that question. Um, and I think that's at the core of this. If you sell because you have to, that's different. If you sell because you think you want to, I mean, at the core of all this should be an enjoyment of the hobby. It shouldn't be a burden. So, I have sold stuff that I had enjoyed at a certain period of time. It didn't fit. And this goes back to my This Is 40 story. As I was thinking about what my collection is and where I derive value, I very much like complete sets. If I can leave my kids only complete sets listed in a spreadsheet, they will be able to sell them. Now, the problem is I probably have 900 complete sets that go from like a 49 Bowman to a dollar Toys R Us, rookie stars of 1989. So there's a lot of sets in there. But that does help me hone what I want to sell. Because if it's not part of a set, getting back to that vintage hockey, it was those cards that had value were 1957 tops. I'm like, I'm just going to finish this set. I have enough of the critical high price cards that I don't need Gordie Howe. I don't need these big ticket cards. So that felt good. I actually thought it through and ended up with something that I really value and look at. So I would think about that. Think about that as you sell. Then I ended up, this is very much in line with that. I had been working on a 1933 Tattoo Orbit set in the late 90s. There was something about that set. It's kind of funny, Art Deco-y look.
And this is the set of 60 that are about the same size as, say, Gaudi cards. They were released also with gum around the same time, red and yellow primarily.
Yeah, I think they're smaller than Gaudi cards. They're interesting kind of size and feel. They have almost like a silky kind of feel to them. Um, and I had one of the short prints, which was Hornsby. I had some Hall of Famers. I had Mac and I had Wayner and some guys like that. Maybe 7, 8 years ago, I'm like, I'm going to go for that set. And I started picking up commons, which weren't cheap. Some of them I did pick up graded cards, but actually cracked them out because they didn't fit how I like to look at things. But going to a couple of years ago, I'm like, I'm never going to finish this set. I was 2/3 of the way there, but I needed Fox and I needed Grove and I needed Dean. And I just know I'm not going to buy those cards, not because they're expensive. That's important, but like I don't value completing that set in a way I would value when I was working on 64 Topps baseball. So this, I know Andrew Aaronstein's on the call. Andrew's a friend, and we see each other in Cooperstown multiple times a year. At some point, Andrew started working at Love the Game auctions. I had met Al Crisafulli at the East Coast National in Westchester. I want to say,
Al being also tied in with that auction.
yeah, Al's the founder and owner, I believe. I had a friend in Nyack who was both buying and selling through Al. So I met Al. So I felt somewhat connected, but Andrew's a real connection. When I started thinking about the Tattoo Orbit set, that's not something I was going to sell on eBay. I listed it at a price I thought was reasonable, but no one's going to buy that. No one's going to buy 40 of those cards at whatever, $2,500. It's just not going to happen. So I talked to Andrew about it, and I will tell you, like I had not thought about the good auction houses related to my collection because I don't think I have it in me to hand off something of great value to a stranger or put it in the mail. Um, I know not everyone on this call knows Andrew Aronstein. I am fortunate to know Andrew Aronstein. So there was a great comfort in handing this to Andrew, saying, I want to sell this. I want to kind of get away from my autographs. Um, Many of them were purchased or gotten in person or through the mail pre-authentication. So certain things I thought were real have been proved not to be real. Certain things I wasn't sure about. I think I'll just feel better trying to move them. Um, I had a signed Jackie Robinson color magazine photo that I actually got at my first card show, September 1973. I think it was him and a Joe DiMaggio for $15, two for 15. Then in the 90s, I got a signed picture of the 72 induction class, which was Koufax, Berra, Lefty Gomez, Buck Leonard, Early Wynn, and Yogi. I was less sure that was real because it came from one of those like fundraiser auctions, and that's a bit of a smarmy game. So I'm like, let me see if I can sell those. They both were authenticated, so that was great. Um, and then they were gone. You know, as much as I said I don't like doing auctions and eBay, I felt this was different. Although I will say, while I trusted their knowledge, which is vast, when I was told, you know, we put it up for like 25%, I think that's it of what we think it's going to go for. That was scary to watch because the auction opens, they're listed low, you see a little flurry, and then it gets a little quiet. I'm like, shoot, I'm gonna get like $600 for these tattoo orbit cards. I
And
just
what is
know
the
it.
say a little more about that time frame. So you've decided to consign. How long are you waiting before auctions start? What is it that you provide in terms of information? How long does it
Yeah.
take for how much attention are you paying to it?
So if Andrew can put this into the chat, you know, it certainly took a few months. So I think I gave Andrew stuff induction weekend 2 years ago, maybe. And those might have gotten in the fall auction. I think it was a few months. Um, some of the Hall of Famers from the tattoo orbit they sent out to get graded, and they kind of separated those from the rest of the pack, um, which made sense. I mean, those were going to get a bulk of the value. Um, when the auction opened, again, I can't quite remember this. It might have been like a 2 week auction. Um, Sorry. I'm actually in the hallway, which is the brightest room in this house. Um, I think it was about 2 weeks, maybe. So it was a pretty condensed period. So I could watch it. Interestingly, to get back to that sell the bottom to buy the top, in that auction was a nice 1966 top set, which I needed. So as I could see my lots going up, I was increasing my bid on the 66 top set. And I ended up selling my three things, buying a 66 top set, and still getting a check. So I was pretty happy about it.
So a bit of a seesaw there where you're making your own balance decisions based on what you're seeing, right?
Right. And for me, that was ideal to do that in once. Because I think if I had just sold and gotten the money, I probably would have been less prone to running out to buy a 66 set. I will say, just as a separate topic, when it comes to buying vintage sets, I think I'm only going to buy them from auction houses like Love of the Game or Clean Sweep Auction. Guys I've dealt with that I know. I see them listed on eBay. I would be hard pressed to purchase, a 1966 set from some dude. I have no idea who he is. Um, but not that I shouldn't have expected this. Al and Andrew, they know what they're talking about. They've done a lot of auctions. They've sold a lot of stuff. Their guesses are not like my guesses. They have a good idea of who their audience is and what sells. So they were kind of dead on in terms of what the results were. So it could not have been a more pleasant experience. And my intent is that as I move forward, there's a place for eBay, but then there's a place for an auction house. Um, and I think, to me, that's going to depend on what I want to sell and when. Right now, I'm enjoying the sets, so I can't see getting rid of those. Um, I don't really pay that much attention to the individual ones. Um, so, I think I'm on a good path. I really need to just go through stuff and kind of say, getting back to kind of how I personally value stuff. If anyone's working on a 1973 top set, I have a ton of doubles that I would move cheaply. I'm kind of giving up on that idea that, if I can get 10 cents a card on eBay for 500 cards, I can't look at it and say, I can't believe I'm selling 500 1973s for a dime. I'm like, I should think, I can't believe I'm selling 500 cards for a dime each because I'm not going to get them from a dealer. I'm not going to get them at a show. I'm not going to sell 500 cards in one shot. So, um, my attitude towards it is changing. And when I can move out a box of cards, and even if I replace it with a set or something else, it feels like progress to me.
Had you thought of doing straight up dealing, whether it's at one show or multiple shows? Had you thought of doing that yourself in terms of organizing stock, bringing it to something, sitting there for an afternoon, and then taking home whatever didn't sell?
No, it's just not. It's just not my personality to do that. I mean, because I think what would end up happening, I would just be bullshitting with people, and stuff would disappear. Or I don't. I mean, I've never bought like a vintage set at a show. Um, I don't know that that stuff moves that way because I'm not going to price it. I try to just get what the market is. Um, so if I was to go in there with whatever a 1957 set, I don't know what I'd sell it for, 7,000, I don't know what the going rate is.
Mhm.
Am I going to get that at a show? I don't think so.
Hmm. So you
Some
value the fact that you've got an existing market, whether it's an eBay market or an auction market by advice from an auctioneer. You would
Yeah,
value that you've already got that hard data that you can work from in those cases.
yeah. I think when I list stuff, I both never feel that I've mispriced it or because everything I leave open to best offer. And I'm happy for stuff to sit. I'll tell you, there's just random things. So I have this incredibly sharp Yvonne Cournoyer rookie card. Like I think that's 66, maybe 65. Um, it is a sharp card. I have no doubt that would grade high. So I have it listed for 600 bucks. I'll sell it for 550 and the PSA sevens or eights go for more. But someone's like, I'll give you like 300 for it. It's not great. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. I understand what you're talking about, but that is not the market for something like that. That's an absurd offer. So, I mean, I don't have to sell it. I'm not pressured to sell it. So I do feel like I'm pricing things right. Things get sold at the right price, and I move on. I saw there was some other. I'm basically done with the stuff I wanted to cover,
Sure.
so I'm
Well,
happy
there's
to
a
like.
question that is, yeah, a cousin of that. Woody asked, does trading sets mean, does it work to do direct trades, whether it's sets or probably or other things, where you're going card for card and you're not looking for the cash side of it. You're looking for, I like this the way that I do, or I value this the way that I do, but I like this even more, and we can come to an even trade.
I think there's great value in that. I think the hardest part is because everyone will get the most value for their stuff, and it's
Hmm.
important to kind of come to an equitable value. But it's hard to match people up. I think Mark Armour and I was working on, I think, 68 and 69, and Mark sent those to me, and I sent him, he might have sent me 200 cards of that. And I basically sent him an almost complete 73 basketball set that was really sharp. So it fit. Um, I traded a bunch of basketball doubles from the 70s to a guy named Scott Crawford, and he gave me half of a lower condition 1951 Topps ringside set,
Mm.
which put me on a path to finish that. Not
Hmm.
usually my thing. That might be something that goes at some point, but it was fun to collect. It was
Hmm.
fun. I did get a graded Marciano and Joe Louis in the context of the condition, which
Yeah, and for
was
those listening, that is it's a color 1951 top set of boxers and wrestlers. And I'd say it's pretty standout. You can see where they
so
decided to
great.
put something up against Bowman prior to entering the baseball arena, and it
Yeah.
was a pretty remarkable set.
Remarkable set. The bios are ridiculous. Like, Kid Gavilan got his eyes shut out as a shoeshine boy in the Bronx. Like it starts with these crazy bios. If you can
Hmm.
just look at trading card database and read the backs, they're hysterical. Um, so that's where I'm on that question.
John asked, when you buy sets, are you at the stage or the era where you have had some factory sealed sets? And if you did, what did you do with those factory sealed sets? Did you open them or leave them as is?
Yeah, so I buy the Topps factory set every year. I'm complete to date. I always open them. At the core, this is a hobby I enjoy. I did buy like some of us did, I bought like unopened sets for my kids when they were little, but they stayed unopened because my kids weren't that interested. But the idea of, and this is why I don't like graded cards. I, I mean, I look through a lot of my binders. So, but I will take stuff out to look at. When I look through boxes, I don't want to feel the plastic. That's not a card. That's a piece of plastic with a card in it. Um, the tangibility of the cards. That's why I like to say about the tattoo orbit. I can still kind of think how those felt. They had a distinct feel to them that I never would know if every one of those was graded. And I think that would be a loss on my part to not have experienced that. I mean, I think there's a ton of sets we could put that way. The 70 and 71 top super baseball and the 70 top super football. If you have never held one in your hand, you do not have the experience of what that card is. To have it in a graded seal, you're missing a key part of what that card is like. For someone who was collecting them at the time, that was part of the great thing about them. These were these giant, thick cards. So I, I'm not against it. I understand the importance of it, but as a collector, my goal is to look at them. And I would say, like, for the top sets of the last 25 years, I've looked at them once. Um, for some reason I don't quite understand, they're not in numerical order, so they must be put in numerical order, which means I have to spend a few hours sorting them out. But that gives me at least a few hours of kind of intense interaction with them. And it's fun. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the newer cards, but I'm not against them. And sometimes there are some super nice cards.
What was the in-person experience of consigning things? And now I think we have people here from Love of the Game, so they could speak to us from their side too. But from your side, what was it like choosing what you decided to consign? And then physically, what did you do? Did you bring it to them? Did they come to you? How did that
No,
work?
I am incredibly fortunate that Andrew comes to my house because he's in Cooperstown. And induction weekend, some of you have been on my porch. Some of you have been in Cooperstown in my house, so you know how that looks. That is an incredible benefit to me to be able to actually have him look at them, take them, and go. That being said, because of the relationship there, I wouldn't have any problem mailing them to them. To me, the question is like, really, what do I want to consign? And I think that's going to change as I go through stuff. And I think, um, what I want to hold in 10 years is no doubt going to be different than what I feel like I want to hold now. There are certain things I can't imagine ever selling, but ever is a long time. So just to know that that's the way it can work. And I think for me, in addition to eBay and love of the game, I am fortunate to have a really good local card store. So for the stuff that doesn't fit that way, I trust Adam Yastrzemski to be fair. In fact, I'll tell you, this is a little bit of a graded story. Um, and this always kind of cracks me up. I used to buy every Topps hockey set starting in 1972. They were cheap. I would get them from Larry Frisch. When I was a senior in high school, I'm like, you know what? It's not that I was ashamed of card collecting, but I don't really need to keep buying hockey sets. So the first year I didn't buy a hockey set was 1979, the Gretzky year. Figures, right? So the last few years, one of the things I was doing was filling in the gaps of those years. I bought a 79 set without Gretzky at a pretty good price and was in Yastrzemski Sports as I was thinking about how to get the Gretzky card. And he had, this is where grading is lost on me. He had a PSA 5, which is X, which was sharp as hell. And he's like, well, it's kind of 70-30. I don't really care about centering as long as it's not miscut. So the idea that centering is such a prevailing factor now works for me 100%. So he had that, and I was like, I was thinking of selling. I had a 54 Jackie Robinson and a 55 Jackie Robinson. I am not going to work on those sets. So he said, let's send them in. Let's send them in. Once they're graded, then we'll have some value to compare. And it actually became a completely fair trade. I still have some Jackie cards from his playing era, so I'm not out of Jackie cards. But now I have a Gretzky rookie that I like. So trading, if you can find, to the early question, if you can find a good trading partner, that's the best.
Andrew, are you active and listening? Can you talk about it from the auction house side in terms of what you're willing to do around consignments? Okay, sounds like Andrew is away from keyboard. So let's take this to the next question.
I can
Uh,
talk about it shortly.
oh yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Gary's, yeah.
Yeah, please
I'm
do.
pretty new, so I don't know a whole lot about how things work at Love the Game. But I know in the past, Andrew and Al have gone out and, talking to people and looked at their collections, but that's after a lot of primary talks on, the phone and email and going back and forth about what's in the collection. So,
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think, someone, I think Jason posted about Love of the Game's catalog. You can get a pretty good feel of what an auction house wants by looking at what they sell. So my guess is like if you have a really sharp 1967 top set, they're interested. If you have a beat to hell one, they might be interested. But they're going to want to know, what does that Seaver card look like? What does that Carew card look like? How are the high numbers? What's the mantle look like? So they might say that's not for us. Doesn't mean someone else won't say it works for them, but I knew enough about what they sold that I like who's going to really take on a Tattoo Orbit partial set. It They do that really well, kind of these oddball vintage pre-war sets. So I'm like, their audience is probably the audience I need to reach. It's not an eBay audience. Um, but yeah, Andrew can speak to that better, but that's just my kind of surmise.
Okay. Jeff asked, have you considered donating cards for a tax benefit? He has a link there that was something he wrote about. But in broadly speaking, did you consider that when you've thought about card valuation and what you do or don't need?
Um, I haven't. I guess there's a point I could. But right now, even though I've been selling fairly actively for the last 9 or 10 years, I'm not a net winner. I've still spent more than I've sold because I've been accumulating a lot of vintage sets. So I don't want the write-off. I want the cash because I wouldn't spend it if I got it as a write-off. But that may be something down the line. I will tell you, like one time I was talking to one of my sons about some of the stuff I have, and he's like, yeah, you're going to leave this for me to take care of. And, I made it clear to him, if I sell it, it's my money. If you sell it, it'll be your money. So don't dismiss the idea of having to do a little work if you inherit something. But again, my goal is to leave them something that's manageable, where they can call Andrew for certain things and call local card store for other things. And, other stuff is not going to have much value. I mean, again, that's why I kind of open my factory sets. I mean, what would have been the point to keep a 1991 Fleer factory set sealed? It's like not worth anything.
To clarify for those who are new broadly to auctions and consigning to auctions, there are a number of places of varying levels of involvement that will accept consignments, various levels of significance into how much effort they put into a catalog or listings, various amounts of attention that they'll give an individual consigner. It is not so hard to Google, more or less, give me a list of sports memorabilia and card auction houses. In this case, we're talking by name about Love of the Game Auction, founded by Al Crisafulli. There are several others that people could mention, and um, either of different levels of volume or in the case of Love of the Game in particular, different types of focus. So if you go out and do some cursory investigation of your own, you'll fairly quickly discover what each one focuses on, and then perhaps the amount of volume, the amount of sale price that you'll see in individual items. And if you're thinking about consigning something, that is going to play into what your own decisions are. And I'm sure
Yeah.
Jeff has given you his personal story. He may have spent a great deal further time looking at a variety of options, or he may have gone right away with one that he knew was a good choice.
Yeah, I feel I've maximized kind of the avenues for the right things. I mean, maximize kind of my choices. Um, Another auction house that I've never consigned with, but I've bought from them years before Love of the Game even existed, is Clean Sweep Auctions, Steve Verkman. I always felt they were card guys. They understood cards. Um, I always felt comfortable with them, but I don't know that I would consign there. Again, just from my personal experience, I'm sure all of the high end auction houses are easy and fine to work with. Maybe. I mean, I'm sure there are horror stories always, but you know,
Jason, you've had your hand up for a bit.
Yeah, so
What's on your mind?
the first thing I just need to say to Jeff is, Jeff, the world is a better place the fewer 1991 Fleer factory sets get opened. Those animals need to stay in their cages. Um, but one takeaway I think I have, right, from overall, Jeff, what you're sharing, and maybe the reason we even put this together, is that planning ahead, having a plan obviously makes a difference. But I think a lot of collectors, unfortunately, um, may end up, right, having a situation where maybe they die unplanned. I hate to say it that way.
Mhm.
And then, I just think about like my wife and my son. If this were to happen to me, maybe they would call Andrew or, maybe they would call Carrie. But in describing my collection, I don't know that they could do much better than to say he has a lot of Hank Aaron cards and he likes the Dodgers. And I guess in such a
Yeah.
case, I don't know what happens. Like, would an auction house say, no problem, we'll come to Chicago and look at all his
Mhm.
stuff? Or would they say,
Yeah.
you can be here next week and bring a bunch of stuff? We'll take a look. I guess that's the question is for folks that don't plan
Yeah.
and somebody
So
unknowledgeable is
yeah,
really,
so I have some thoughts on that. And I've I've seen it through relatives who died, at advanced ages and left behind minimal information, right? Um, their surviving spouse had no passwords and they had no way to kind of access what was out there. So I did prepare for my wife a death document saying, listen, if I'm dead, sorry, here's who you need to call. And when it comes to the cards, I have a few people listed. So to Jason's point, everyone on this call, that's a good fallback. Like I have friends who like my wife's just going to throw everything out, and I'm like, I know his wife. I'm like, no, she'll call me and I'll look at it and then I'll know what to do. So if you could have kind of a hobby friend that your family can rely on to kind of go through stuff and treat things fairly, I think that's as good a plan as any.
So, Jeff, to say a bit of what I'm hearing back to you, you have an advantage in reaching out to people who you know socially, or at least you have some kind of collegial relationship with. Talk with them a bit about what your own ideas might be as an early step, so that when the time comes, if something surprises either side, progress is able to be made, even if you haven't gone through
Right.
all the steps of making a detailed plan for your family.
Right. And I am fortunate, as many of us are on this call, to be connected to people who are very knowledgeable, right? So, you know, I can go to somebody and say, listen, you can have first shot on anything you want here. I know you'll be fair. Um, but I have complete trust in the people in my orbit to know what to do with things. I will say also, I think most card collectors are probably on the autism spectrum and are very kind of obsessed and organized. My stuff is all labeled and organized. That's why I think Nick Vosbrink said this once because I sent him a 1979 Burger King Yankees checklist card, and then I sent another to someone else, and he's like, "How many do you have?" I'm like, "Oh, I was buying a lot of those Burger King then." But I know exactly where that is. Like if someone asked me for one, I would be able to see if I had one, in 10 minutes. Um, Keeping stuff labeled and orderly is also a big benefit to your survivors. So they don't have to walk into a room and see stuff all over the place because then they're not going to know what to do. It's just going to look like a bunch of junk. But if it's kind of labeled and boxed and bindered, they'll be able to say, oh, here's something that says 1969 tops. What is that worth? You know, so I would really advocate for that.
Mhm. And if you want a competitive balance to what Jeff has just described, I promise you can walk through my card closet and we'll see how that goes for you in terms of locating what you care to locate. So there is a broad range that one can go to, and I may have a little bit more work ahead of me than Jeff has already
Well, you're
exercised.
younger. You're younger too, so you have time.
We are at 8:49 Eastern Time, and we have no additional questions in chat. We're willing to throw it open to anybody who has any additional conversational topics, any questions here live. Otherwise, I'd say it's been a great session, a lot of stuff to think about. And in terms of where people might want to go from here, you now have some, not only some guidance, but you have Jason's cavalcade of Rookie Star and other card changes in his own background. You can tell who it is you could reach out to, whether it's me, whether it's Jeff, whether it's Jason or others, who can give you some advice or point you to places where you could get answers.
Yeah, I'm happy to I mean, if anyone wants to reach out, I'm happy to talk further. I don't know that there's anything left on the table for me to talk about,
Hmm.
but it has been interesting. And there is um there is a certain amount of fun of selling your stuff, right?
Mm.
The old George Carlin stuff, like your stuff is shit and my shit is stuff.
Yeah.
Like that to have that proven financially, right? It's
Hmm.
like, yes, I'll tell you a separate story.
Yeah.
I was born in 1962 in Brooklyn. You can imagine how large Joe Namath looms in my life to the point where our youngest son is Joseph William, Joe Willie. That's how far it goes. In 1970, they issued kind of a G.I. Joe sized doll of Joe Namath, which I have, pretty complete, or had. And they had these 12 mod outfits, leather coats, fur coats. I have toted that stuff around from Brooklyn to Long Island to Staten Island to Chicago to Cooperstown. And finally, I'm like, you know what? I think I'm okay to sell this. and I listed them. I've sold like a quarter of the outfits, and I sold the doll, and it's fine. I've got pictures of it. I can remember what it feels like. But I'm like, this bag of stuff that has traveled with me since I'm 8 years old is producing some cash, which is kind of it's a rewarding feeling, like it has some value. So if anyone's looking for Joe Namath mod outfits, let me know. I've got 9 of them left.
All right. Nero fiddles while Chris burns. You are up. Please unmute and ask
Okay.
your question.
Hey, hello, Jeff. It's good to
Hey,
see you.
Chris. Yeah, same
Uh,
here.
I have to ask you about sets. I know your set building is condition is a big thing across the set.
Hmm.
So what about sets where your condition is variable, but your star cards, your big cards, are like super nice?
Yeah.
I mean, is that something that's gonna is it gonna push that set a little bit further? Or is
It
it gonna
it
be
it
like, or is the condition of the other cards gonna drag it down?
it may or may not. Some of the auction houses, I don't know if Love of the Game does it. I know Clean Sweep does. They'll list something and say overall VGX, um, and then they'll kind of do percentages. They'll be like
Right,
50% VG, 10%, but but then they will say the stars are in better condition, and they may send them out to get graded to prove that point. I would, it's a good point, Chris, because if you are collecting sets, consistency of condition is meaningful, I think, to a buyer, so they don't get something that is like this is near mint and this is poor. That's because then people like I should speak for myself. Then people like I have to upgrade these cards, and that's going to cost me X amount more, and I'm going to deduct that from the price I sell or I pay the seller. So I think consistency is important. When I was looking at vintage Mark Armour, I know I've dropped his name several times today. He kind of, I don't know if convinced me is the word, but kind of made it. It was a bit of an epiphany. He's like, for those old sets, VGXX is kind of good. So the stuff that I collected as a kid are really nice. They've been mined, they've been secured, it is unfair, and I won't pay the prices to get that same condition for 1958. I just won't. It's out of my range. But I have found that this kind of VGXX, there's deals to be had. They're nice enough. Invariably, I have doubles because I have um, bunches of cards from all of those years that I also sell to supplement. Like I'm in a no doubles that's a real defensive positioning term. I'm in a no doubles frame of mind. I do not want doubles anymore. If I have a set, that's all I need. I don't need to have extra. So for the vintage sets, I'll sell them for well, I guess these are vintage now. We're all vintage ourselves. The sets from the 70s, I kind of need to just move those doubles out, like I said
are you
earlier.
selling sets that include doubles? I mean, are you selling
No,
the set and the doubles together?
No, I've never done that. Although I've seen people list that way. I was lucky enough that this is the flip side of my Gretzky story. By the late 70s, my friends didn't want their cards anymore, so they gave them to me. So from 73 to 75, I had multiple sets. So I just sold all those sets, the extras, but now I'm left with just doubles or triples, or particularly in 73. I have a lot of like individual cards. It's kind of ridiculous because then it's like, what do you do? So what I've done with the doubles recently is I'll say, 200 cards, 140 individual cards because I don't want any of them anymore. Like I want to move the whole thing out. So that has really helped.
Okay, some call him Tim Wiles. Tim, you're up.
Hey there. Great presentation. Thanks, guys. I had a friend. I just want to tell a quick story and hope that it might resonate with Jeff or any of the experts here. But a friend who died recently, who was a collector and who had the luxury, you might say, of dying for 2 years or so. And so one time I was seeing him and his family, and his collection wasn't organized. It was more like the closet that one of the hosts is referring to. And so I just said, hey, when my friend passes away, I didn't live too far away. I said, I'm willing to come down. I'm not an expert, but I can tell you what is potentially valuable, what is not valuable, and what's sort of in between. And I did that. It was enjoyable. It helped the family. They then approached an auction house, knowing what they had as opposed to
Hmm.
not knowing what they had. And I guess I would just suggest that the motive Jeff is talking about to try to save the trouble for those you're going to leave behind is a great thing. Like this was not a collection that was so obviously fantastic that someone would come to their home and from an auction house and all that kind of stuff. But there were some gems in it, some game worn uniforms, stuff like that. So anyway, I wonder if that resonates with anyone, if there's any kind of like organized effort to do that sort of thing for fellow collectors.
One thing I would just add to that as a side story, the one thing that no survivor wants is to have someone come over and cherry pick and then still leave them with a bunch of stuff. To me, and I've talked to friends about this, you have to be willing to accept something less overall for the collection to get it all out the door. Because then there's still that burden of what do I do with the rest of these now? Then they will go in the garbage, right? So when if you have a reputable local card shop or someone you can talk to, whoever's a survivor should say, listen, what is your price for all of this? I know, again, Yastrzemski Sports in Cooperstown, I've referred people to him. He takes everything. So in that everything are some gems and some junk, and but at least it's gone. The person is relieved of that burden. So I that would be another piece of good advice. Make sure whoever you go to, if you go to one place, takes it all.
And that's another angle on people you can reach out to here, is we hope we've shown you that we have a serious-minded approach to this. So if you
Mhm.
need questions at whatever level, we will try to connect you if we can't answer the questions ourselves.
Mhm.
Dixie, you are next up.
Thank you. This is what makes SABR so great. I'm in between Tim Wiles and Mark Armour. Good company.
A
Good
dream
company.
come true.
Anyway, this past year was my 51st consecutive year of collecting at this stage, and I collect the heritage, Topps heritage. Even though I hate Topps and I hate their short prints, I hate everything about it, but I'm obsessed. My obsession takes over my hatred. But anyway, at some point, I decided that I was determined to find out how much it was going to cost me to get the whole 500 card set of Heritage. And I
Hmm.
just kept buying and buying and buying, and then there was nothing left to buy except go on eBay and look for the short prints. I did that. I'm guessing it cost me $650. But now I have 700, 800 doubles, triples, and quadruples. So if there's anyone out on this call who is crazy enough to buy Topps Heritage set for this year, I can fill any hole you have in the first 400 cards. Please just send me an email. I will send you the cards. You can send me the postage. That's all I care about. I don't care about any of the money. I just have to get rid of some of these cards. But I now have, I think, my first Topps Heritage set complete, 1 to 500. It was a chore.
Hmm. That's interesting.
Yeah. We moved into stories I think each of us has our own version of, I have to say. Thank you, Dixie. Jeff, do you have anything that strikes you as from your own history along those lines?
Um, Sort of. There's certainly sets I've put together, not recently, that cost more than the set is. But again, it goes back to the beginning. This hobby should not be a burden. Like if it's a burden, sell it all now. It should be fun. And, I've given up on putting together vintage sets because I ran out of years that I had a critical mass to start with. I enjoyed that process. Would I have been better off looking for a complete set and selling my doubles? Probably. I don't think the margin was that far apart. Um, but I did enjoy that process, right? You just start filling and filling and then you're done. Um, but again, you can't worry about that. If the goal, to Dixie's point, is like, I want to finish this set, then you finish it and you're not doing it. It's like when people talk about their houses as their number one investment, that is true, but it's the place you live. There's, it's where you live. It's where you raise your kids and stuff. It's not an investment like a CD. So you have to kind of separate the enjoyment part of it from the dollar amount. But
Yeah.
we've all been there trying to finish sets.
Yeah, well said. Mark,
Oh, hey, thanks. And thanks for doing this, Jeff.
You're welcome.
This is 10 years. At the end of this year, it'll be 10 years for this committee. And I think when it was started, I probably talked to Jeff like an hour after the committee started for the first time. And we've been having this conversation about this topic
Mhm.
like for 10 years.
Right.
And I think that he and I have both had different changes of direction over that time
Mhm.
in terms of which is great. I mean, that's all part of it, right?
Yeah.
I'd say in my case, I've actually made quite a bit of progress on the reduction side.
Mhm.
And it's mainly because, and so my philosophy has been, and again, it's all comes down to what Jeff started with, which is, you get to a certain point where you have to start thinking about like what's going to happen,
Mhm.
for my kids and everything. My daughter will say, "Dad, I just want the money. Start working on selling these cards," right? So,
Right.
um, which I sympathize with that. So, um, what I sort of decided, and I didn't really decide this like any sort of algorithm, but really it's more like my feeling sort of led me to is that at my core, I've always been interested in collecting vintage sets. That's kind of what I've been driven by, like really my whole collecting life. I think the first set I ever put together myself was 1975, which I probably put together like 3 or 4 years later.
Hmm.
1976 is when I started buying sets, and then I started essentially building sets backwards. And I'm about 20 cards away from finishing 1954.
Wow.
So it's a long, long process. And this could be it. I don't know. I don't need any cards that are hard in 1954. And I'll tell you my secret for 1954 is that my banks, Aaron and Kalon, are pretty rough. I mean, like rougher than
Mhm.
I would ever take for any sets later. I just lowered my bar. Anyway, so in order to do that, I have kind of I've kind of been pretty ruthless about the cards I have that are not in the vintage realm. So like all the stuff like that I've tried over the years to try and scratch that itch, like Kellogg's or Post
Mhm.
or anything else. All that stuff is like, it doesn't really scratch the itch the same way.
Huh.
So I've kind of chipped away at getting rid of that stuff. And it's not even, I mean, some of it's the money. I get a little bit of money for it, but a lot of it's the volume, honestly. And my goal by, I don't know, within a couple of years is to be able to like is to be able to take my three core family members and say, see this shelf here that has all these top sets on it? That's what you need to call Andrew about or whatever.
Right, right,
The rest of it you can give to Goodwill. I mean,
right, right.
it's really down to that. I'm not there yet. I'm not really close to there. I've got a lot of other fun stuff that'll probably take me a while to get, but it's almost like we all have this little sort of pyramid, and you sort of chop the stuff off that's the least interesting to you in terms of how much it actually makes you
Mhm.
happy. Um, and I'm no longer made happy by volume as I used to be.
Yeah.
I think now I think it's there's certain cards that really actually make me happy genuinely,
Yeah.
and other ones are just like, isn't it cool that I finished that set? And like, now what? So anyway, kind of where I am, but I hope that at the end of this year or sometime during the course of this year that the powers that be on this committee do something to recognize our 10th anniversary, which
Oh,
will
wow.
be technically at the end of the year, but I'm not a stickler.
Okay, sounds like a gauntlet hitting the floor to me. All right,
Yeah.
Mark. And do.
But thank you for doing this, Matthew and Jeff.
Sure thing. I see we have another, we have a couple notes. One, Mike Rich pointed out that when you are consigning, when you're selling, whatever else it is, your collection may well end up in pieces because there may
Right.
be times when only some things fit with whatever the seller wants. Perhaps that you really do value some of the things that, although they won't sell for a certain price, you think that they might in the future, so you'll only consign pieces at a time. Like
Yeah.
consider that too as you're going through that if you decide you do want to sell. And as I see here, Gordon raised an interesting question because we hadn't talked about the particulars of grading, especially across grading companies. Jeff, what did you think about for grading? And did you consider a range of grading companies? Since there are a few out there, PSA being the one that's perhaps best known, but then others that are at least an option.
So I'll tell you where I had some grading experience and it really bothered me. Part of it was I didn't quite understand how it worked. So I had um, two cards from the Babe Ruth Candy Company set. There's six of those cards. They were very much counterfeited, maybe in the 70s or 80s. So so only SGC was grading them, and it was really important just to get it authenticated. I sent that in, and I sent in a like a domino disc of Ty Cobb that I had. So I had these two things that I wanted to sell. The price for those two were like, I don't remember, like $60 each to grade. It was something ridiculously high. This is going back. And they came back worse than what I thought. And I didn't quite understand it, although they're looking at it in a way I'm not looking at it. So now I had something that was actually less valuable. And I did sell them, and I kind of made enough to get a nice 56 mantle, which I felt overall that was a good trade. And I still have another one of those Ruth cards, but it really kind of soured me on grading. The experience with the Jackie Robinson cards was a little different because I went through someone who was grading in bulk. It was part of a trade. There was a different goal in mind. I'm just not into the process. I'm just not that keen on it. And you know, there's one thing to look at. So I have a 54 banks, and the centering on that is tough. And top to bottom, the name is kind of miscut. So I'm looking at stuff. Still I see ones that are comparable that are like threes because it's overall nice. If I send that in and it comes back a one, I'm going to just be sad. And I'm probably going to break it out and then realize I didn't want to do that. again, that's why I think when I sell the raw cards, if someone else wants to take that chance, I mean, there is a chance, right? I'm not saying this is PSA. So you see a lot of listings that way. This will be a seven. I just say what it is. I definitely when I list on eBay, I do higher resolution scans, so the pictures are much better. Um, but I'm not guaranteeing anything. So if someone wants to buy my 1964 Gordie Howe because they think it's a seven and it comes back a five, that's not my problem, you know. So it's not that it's a bad industry. It has helped eBay grow. It has helped everyone kind of deal in the same language. It's just not for me.
Yes, I'll say that I feel like that question followed well the graphic I created for this that was all Magic 8 Ball stuff. There's lots of questions here that are Magic 8 Ball kind of
Mm-hmm.
things. And to be particular about that one, Gordon, who knows for certain whether any of these companies will be here at a certain time. There are some that have been here within the hobby and have really established a beachhead. But even in the last several months, we've seen consolidation. We've seen focus change, staff, and customer
Right.
experience stuff change so significantly that there is no clear answer at this time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
some of those questions you can just keep in mind as you see what's going on, and you can reach out to us if you have particular questions, and we'll give you our opinion. If we were in in a state to make those decisions, I'm sure we'd make a clearer statement. But really, collecting is many times about dealing with this, right? Balancing this uncertainty that you see.
Yeah.
Jason, you have your hand up.
So I'm just pinch hitting, right? Hence the Manny Mota career run behind me. But Brian Warner said in the chat that he'd like to make a comment if you're able to call on him.
Well, Pedro Borbon, aka Brian Warner.
Thanks, Jason and Jeff and Matthew. It's been fun listening to you guys. I had two observations. Jeff, I couldn't agree more with you about grading. I had a huge collection, and I just wanted to pass on my experience this past year. I actually sold my collection,
Mm.
98% of it this past year.
Mm.
And here's why, and it's sort of what Jeff's been getting at. I realized I have three daughters and a wife who could care less about my collection. Okay. Nobody else has expressed an interest in it. And I knew that I'm getting up in age, not that I'm ready to go right now, but if I didn't have a chance to get rid of it, I told people I'm going to get quarters on the dollar. If I
Right.
if I die tomorrow, they're going to get pennies or nickels.
Right. Right.
That's what it comes down to. And I was lucky enough to have somebody that offered me what I felt was a fair offer. Helped him because it's a younger kid that I just adore, and he's going to get
Mhm.
into the system, and he'll be there, and I get to watch him
Yeah.
do that. So
Hmm.
I kept
Nice.
my 55 top set, and I'm upgrading it little by little so that
Nice.
it'll be as good as it can. But that's pretty much all I have for the most part.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I just wanted to pass on. I decided to make that decision while I'm still coherent. How's that?
Yeah. Right. Right. I think that's a really valuable insight.
Well, geez, Brian, you say you're coherent, and yet you're wearing Miami and Denver gear. I don't know.
They're up 17-10.
I think we're over to Gordon, who also has his hand up. Go for it.
Yeah, hi. It took me a while to figure out how to raise my hand. So I do appreciate the last couple remarks. Um, I guess more to the point that I may not have really conveyed well in the text question is if I don't sell my cards before I pass, and they're not graded, then what guidance am I giving my loved ones for what to do and where to go? I mean, I don't have any like good buddies who are card
Right.
collectors. They wouldn't know who to go to. I just I'm not ready to part with my cards. I mean,
Right.
some of them I am. I have it's a pretty big footprint, and some of them are great, and some of them are junk,
Right.
probably like most people. But I don't know what how to guide my loved ones and what to do if I don't
Right.
sell my cards. Can you help with that?
So I would say, where do you live, Gordon?
Northern Virginia.
So my hunch is, it's a funny world, the card world, but there are lots of very good card store owners that are fair. They exist. I know they exist because I know some. Starting to develop some rapport with them and say, listen, here's who I am, here's what I've got. Like you can start teasing this stuff. Like, so again, I have a nice local store. I went in once and said, listen, would you and we always kind of do some good dealing. I'm like 1973 Topps baseball doubles. He's like, I wouldn't pay anything for them. Like when I buy a big collection, that's how I price them. They just have to come in. But if you can develop some rapport and start moving some of that stuff now, that'll help. If eBay is an option for you, start moving. You can make some good headway on that. You could reach out to auction houses to just say what you have, but a lot of times, and I don't know what your collection is, but people often overvalue what they have, and if they say like, "Oh, I've got all the top sets from 1980 to now," that's great. It's enjoyable, but your local card shop might give you $100 for it. I mean, you just have to kind of accept what those things are. So try to establish those relationships now, and you can test them out. You don't have to go all in. You can say, listen, what would you give me for this? And if it feels right, sell it. If it feels bad, don't. Um,
Yeah, and
yeah,
it is free to circle back to something that Jeff said at the beginning. It is free for you to go into eBay, search for the thing that you have, and then look at completed and look at sold listings. And you'll see under completed things that were sold and unsold. For sold, you'll see the basic price that things are sold for, either for buy it now at auction. There are more sophisticated ways to go about it, but that will at least help you set a reasonable range for things that really are moving or are not moving based on the valuation that the dealer or bidders put on
yeah.
it.
And Bernie's comment in chat about Greg Morris, he does deal in a lot of commons and stuff, not necessarily 2024 commons, but Greg Morris is one. I think Burbank Sports Cards will buy bulk stuff. But again, when you start working with dealers, you can't be like, well, I know these are 50 cents a piece on eBay, but like that's where they're going to sell them. So they're going to give you a dime. You just have to kind of come to those terms yourself. But yeah, to Matthew's point, just doing that bit of research right now will help you understand what the selling price is.
Yep. Anything else you need to know, Gordon?
Uh, no, that's good for now.
All
I
right,
guess,
thank you.
yeah, thanks.
All right. I don't see any additional questions or hand raised at the time. So I think we can wrap up this excellent session. More than an hour of your time was spent tonight. We appreciate that very much, every one of you. And we look forward to multiple sessions during 2026 that are along these lines. You'll see some announcements of ones that we were doing, either shared attention with other groups or ones that are set up and specifically facilitated by SABR Baseball Cards Committee. If you have any additional questions or anything else that you would like to cover, feel free to reach out to me, to Jason, to anybody else who you see here who has really had a voice of authority, and we will do our best to support you. We do encourage you to read the SABR Baseball Cards blog. There's a long history there, a wide range of voices, perspectives, and topics, and there is a ton of great and detailed information there. So if there is anything that you really think has not been covered, we're also open to that. You can suggest topics, even if we may take them and say, that sounds like a great thing for you to investigate and write about.
Yeah.
Lord knows that happened to me.
Yeah.
Jason, any other thoughts before we wrap up?
Not really. Just a big thank you to Jeff for obviously coming up with a topic that so many people care about and talking through your experiences in a way that are going to help a lot of us. So, and Matthew, always great job running these things. So
Yeah,
fantastic.
thank you, Matthew.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks so much, Jeff. Best wishes
Yeah,
to
you're
everyone this
welcome.
evening. and have a wonderful rest of January, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks,
See you,
everybody. This
everyone.
was great.
Thank you.
Great. Bye bye.
Thanks,
Night.
Kev.